Your life is a direct reflection of what you demand from it. If you accept mediocrity, that is exactly what you will get. But when you raise your standards, everything changes. You attract stronger relationships, bigger opportunities, and unshakable confidence. The world meets you at the level you set. But if you settle, you surrender your greatness. Will you demand more from yourself and unlock your true potential? Or let life hand you leftovers? The choice is yours, and it defines everything. In a few moments, you'll learn how raising your standards unlocks everything you desire. Bigger opportunities, stronger relationships, limitless growth. The power of setting high standards. When you decide to set high standards for yourself, everything changes. The way you think, the way you act, the way you respond to challenges, it all transforms. High standards are the silent architects of your destiny. They define what you will accept and what you will refuse. But many people drift through life, accepting mediocrity because they have never demanded more from themselves. They accept average results because they have not set the standard for greatness. But think for a moment. What if you raised your standards today? What if you decided that average is no longer acceptable? You would immediately start to see the world differently. Opportunities that once seemed out of reach would become possibilities. The doors that seemed locked would suddenly open. This is the hidden secret behind every great achievement. A relentless commitment to higher standards. Imagine you are standing at a crossroads. One path leads to comfort and ease, the familiar territory where you accept things as they are. The other path leads to challenge and growth, a journey where you demand more from yourself and refuse to settle for anything less. Which path will you choose? Cornelius Vanderbilt started with nothing but a vision of what he wanted. His standard was simple. He would be the best, no matter the cost. Through sheer determination and a refusal to accept mediocrity, he built an empire in shipping and railroads, becoming one of the wealthiest men of his time. He did not accept average. He demanded excellence, and the world had no choice but to comply. Now, ask yourself, what standards have you set for your life? Are you demanding the best from yourself, or are you accepting what comes easily? If you find yourself settling, it is time to raise your standards. When you do, you change the course of your life. Higher standards force you to develop new skills, seek out better opportunities, and align with people who expect more from you. The only question left is, are you ready to set a new standard for your life? If so, the journey begins now. Breaking free from limiting beliefs. The most formidable prison is one we cannot see, the fortress of belief that confines our potential. Within these invisible walls, dreams wither and possibilities shrink, all because we've accepted limitations as truth. Roger Bannister's medical experts declared the 4-minute mile physically impossible, warning it would damage the human heart. Yet Bannister refused to accept their verdict. When he crossed that finish line at 3:59.4, he didn't just break a record, he shattered a collective mental barrier. Within just 46 days, Australian John Landy beat Bannister's time. Within 3 years, 16 runners had accomplished what was once deemed impossible. This pattern repeats throughout human history. The Wright brothers took flight when aviation experts insisted heavier-than-air machines could never fly. Thomas Edison tested over 10,000 materials before creating the light bulb, while critics called his pursuit foolish. Kathleen Switzer ran the Boston Marathon when women were considered physically incapable of the distance. Your limiting beliefs speak in familiar voices. I'm not talented enough. I'm too old to start. People like me don't succeed at this. These thoughts aren't facts. They're stories you've internalized from past experiences, childhood messages, societal expectations, or previous failures. The brain forms neural pathways through repetition. Each time you think, I can't, you strengthen that belief. But neuroplasticity works both ways. You can deliberately create new pathways through conscious effort and repetition of empowering thoughts. Begin by identifying your limiting beliefs. Listen to your internal dialogue, especially when facing challenges. What excuses consistently appear? What stories do you tell yourself about why you cannot achieve your dreams? Next, question these beliefs mercilessly. Is there objective evidence supporting them, or have you simply accepted them as truth? For each limiting belief, find counterexamples. People who've succeeded despite similar obstacles. Replace limiting beliefs with empowering alternatives. Instead of "I'm too old," try "My experience gives me advantages others don't have." Instead of "I always fail," try "Each attempt teaches me something valuable." Take small, consistent actions that contradict your limiting beliefs. Every step forward weakens their hold and reinforces your new, empowering mindset. Remember that breaking free is not a single event, but a practice. Old beliefs will resurface, especially during challenges. When they do, recognize them for what they are: echoes of an outdated operating system, not your true potential. Your greatest achievements await on the other side of these self-imposed boundaries. The question is not whether you can break free, but whether you're willing to try. Mastering the art of consistency, greatness, isn't an accident, but an accumulation. Countless small actions compounded over time into extraordinary achievement. While many fixate on dramatic breakthroughs, true mastery emerges through the quiet power of showing up day after day after day. Consider water's remarkable capacity to transform landscapes. The Grand Canyon wasn't carved through sudden force, but through water's patient persistence over millions of years. Similarly, your most meaningful accomplishments will rarely come from heroic bursts of effort, but from sustained, deliberate practice. Andrew Carnegie's rise from impoverished immigrant to industrial titan exemplifies this principle. Beginning as a bobbin boy earning $1.20 weekly, Carnegie didn't experience overnight success. Instead, he methodically climbed through positions at the Telegraph Company and Pennsylvania Railroad, mastering each role before advancing. When he finally entered the steel industry, it was his consistent application of the Bessemer process that revolutionized production, while others hesitated to adopt new methods. Neuroscience reveals why consistency holds such transformative power. Each time you repeat an action, the myelin sheath surrounding those neural pathways strengthens, making execution progressively easier and more automatic. This biological process explains why initial progress often feels painfully slow. Your brain is literally building new infrastructure. The challenge lies not in understanding consistency's importance, but in practicing it when motivation inevitably wanes. Motivation is inherently unstable, fluctuating with mood, energy, and circumstances. Relying on motivation alone guarantees eventual failure. Instead, successful people develop systems that make consistency possible regardless of emotional state. Equally critical is the minimum viable effort approach. Rather than aiming for perfect performance each day, commit to showing up even in reduced capacity. On difficult days, a 5-minute workout or writing 50 words preserves the consistency chain while honoring your current limitations. Track your consistency visibly. Jerry Seinfeld's "Don't Break the Chain" method, marking a calendar each day you maintain your practice, creates powerful psychological momentum. Few forces are more motivating than seeing your unbroken streak of consistency. Perhaps most important is redefining consistency itself. Perfection isn't the goal. Persistence is. When you inevitably miss a day, the crucial skill becomes starting again immediately, without self-punishment. Champions aren't those who never fall, but those who continuously return to their practice. The question isn't whether consistency works. History proves it does. The question is whether you're willing to embrace the unglamorous daily work that precedes extraordinary results. Will you continue when progress seems imperceptible? Will you trust the process when others demand shortcuts? Your answer determines not just what you'll achieve, but who you'll become. The power of resilience. Life rarely unfolds according to plan. Between where you stand and where you aim to be lies a landscape riddled with unexpected detours, formidable barriers, and moments of crushing disappointment. Yet within this challenging terrain, resilience emerges as the defining quality of those who ultimately succeed, not because they avoid failure, but because they refuse to be defined by it. Thomas Edison's relentless pursuit of the incandescent light bulb Each failed experiment represented not just wasted materials, but potentially wasted years. When journalists framed his journey as a series of failures, Edison famously reframed the narrative. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. This profound perspective shift transformed what others saw as repeated defeat into a methodical elimination process leading inevitably toward breakthrough. Resilience isn't merely enduring hardship. It's the capacity to extract meaning from suffering and convert setbacks into strategic advantage. Viktor Frankl, surviving the unimaginable horrors of Nazi concentration camps, discovered that those who maintained an inner purpose amid external chaos demonstrated remarkable survival rates. His observation that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, captures resilience's transformative power. 3 practices distinguish the exceptionally resilient. First, they practice realistic optimism, acknowledging difficult truths while maintaining faith in their capacity to overcome. Second, they cultivate cognitive flexibility, the ability to reframe setbacks as temporary and specific rather than permanent and pervasive. Third, they build support networks that provide both emotional sustenance and honest feedback. Perhaps most importantly, resilient individuals recognize that struggle itself contains inherent value. Just as muscles grow stronger through resistance training, character develops through adversity. The Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold-infused lacquer, provides a powerful metaphor. Rather than disguising breaks, kintsugi highlights them, creating something more beautiful and valuable precisely because it has been broken and mended. The question facing you isn't whether you'll encounter obstacles. That's guaranteed. The question is whether you will allow these inevitable challenges to diminish or develop you. Will you retreat into bitterness when plans collapse? Or will you extract wisdom from wreckage? Will you abandon worthy goals at the first significant resistance? Or will you adapt your approach while maintaining your direction? Remember, resilience isn't about never falling. It's about rising one more time than you fall. And in that persistent rising lies the difference between a life of frustration and a legacy of triumph. The importance of self-belief, the most powerful force shaping your destiny, isn't your circumstances, connections, or even your capabilities. It's your belief in what's possible. Self-belief operates as both catalyst and sustainer, transforming potential into performance and dreams into reality. Without this fundamental conviction in your own capacity, even extraordinary talents lie dormant. But with it, seemingly ordinary individuals routinely accomplish the extraordinary. Mary Kay Ash, age 45. When many contemplate retirement, she invested her life savings of $5,000 0 cents to launch a cosmetics company after experiencing gender discrimination throughout her career. Despite her son's lawyer advising against the venture and facing a business landscape overwhelmingly dominated by men, her unwavering self-belief propelled her forward. That single storefront grew into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, spanning over 35 countries and creating opportunities for millions of women entrepreneurs. When asked about her success formula, Ash consistently emphasized belief. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you're right. The paradox of self-belief is that it must precede evidence. You must believe in your capacity before you've proven it, which requires courage. Many wait for validation before believing, not realizing this inverts the natural order of achievement. As Henry Ford noted, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Cultivating self-belief begins with conscious language management. Notice how often you use phrases like, I can't, that's impossible, or I'm not good enough. Replace these with empowering alternatives. I'm learning how. I'll find a way. I'm improving daily. Your subconscious mind constantly absorbs your verbal and mental declarations, treating them as instructions for reality creation. Equally important is surrounding yourself with belief reinforcers, people who see your potential even when you momentarily lose sight of it. One supportive voice can sustain you through inevitable periods of doubt. Perhaps most critical is taking belief-lined action. Self-belief without accompanying behavior remains mere wishful thinking. Each action consistent with your vision solidifies your belief, creating tangible evidence supporting your internal conviction. The question isn't whether self-belief works. History unequivocally confirms it does. The real question is whether you'll exercise your power to believe. Will you accept artificial limitations? Or will you dare to believe in possibilities beyond current evidence? Will you wait for perfect conditions, or will you proceed with the audacity that has defined every great achiever? Your potential awaits your belief to activate it. The time to believe is now. The discipline of focus. In a world engineered for distraction, your ability to focus has become your most precious resource. While attention scatters easily across news cycles and novelty, extraordinary achievement demands sustained concentration on what matters most. Focus transforms scattered potential into concentrated power, the difference between diffused sunlight and a laser beam capable of cutting through steel. The human mind, remarkable as it is, fundamentally operates as a single-channel processor. Neuroscience reveals we don't actually multitask. We rapidly switch attention, each transition exacting a cognitive toll. A University of California study found that after each interruption, workers require an average of 23 minutes to fully regain concentration. These productivity taxes compound daily, transforming potentially profound work into fragmented mediocrity. While J.P. Morgan contemporaries dispersed energy across multiple ventures, Morgan maintained relentless focus on building financial infrastructure. This singular concentration enabled him to orchestrate massive industrial consolidations, restructure failing railroads, and establish banking systems that transformed commerce. During the Panic of 1907, when Wall Street teetered toward collapse, Morgan sequestered competing bankers in his library and refused to let them leave until they crafted a solution. His legendary focus literally saving the American economy. Focus operates on three critical levels. First, strategic focus determines which mountains you'll climb, which goals warrant your precious attention. Second, tactical focus organizes your days and weeks to advance those priorities. Third, operational focus governs your moment-by-moment attention management, protecting your cognitive resources from the 1,000 distractions lying in ambush. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that focus follows passion. When genuinely aligned with meaningful work, maintaining concentration becomes less effortful. This explains why someone distracted during mundane tasks can become utterly absorbed in activities that ignite their curiosity. True focus flows naturally when you've identified work worth doing. How much of your day passes in distracted half-attention? How many potentially transformative projects remain unfinished while you respond to minor urgencies? What greatness might emerge if you directed your full cognitive resources toward your most important priorities? The coming revolution belongs to those who cultivate focus in an age of distraction. The question isn't whether focused attention works, rather whether you're willing to defend this precious resource as vigilantly as you would any other irreplaceable asset. Will you continue surrendering your attention to whatever shouts loudest, or will you reclaim it for what matters most? The art of decision-making life unfolds through the gateway of choice. Each decision, whether monumental or seemingly trivial, shapes your reality with cumulative power that few forces can match, while some drift passively through existence, surrendering their path to circumstance or others' expectations. Masters of decision-making actively architect their destiny through deliberate choices that reflect their deepest values and boldest aspirations. The quality of your decisions ultimately determines the quality of your life. This isn't philosophical abstraction, but practical reality. Your health, relationships, career, and fulfillment all crystallize from the thousands of decisions you've made and continue to make daily. Andrew Mellon's conventional wisdom dismissed aluminum as an impractical curiosity, too expensive for commercial viability. Mellon made the courageous decision to finance the Pittsburgh Reduction Company. While competitors hesitated, paralyzed by uncertainty, Mellon's decisive backing helped revolutionize manufacturing, transportation, and consumer goods through aluminum's widespread adoption. His decisiveness extended beyond aluminum. His banking decisions rescued countless enterprises during economic downturns, while his art acquisition decisions ultimately created the National Gallery of Art. Effective decision-making operates on three critical levels. First, values-based decisions establish your fundamental priorities, what truly matters in your life. Second, strategic decisions determine your direction and resource allocation. Third, tactical decisions address daily implementation. Mastery requires alignment across all three levels, ensuring your moment-by-moment choices advance your highest priorities. Neuroscience reveals that decision fatigue undermines judgment. Each decision depletes cognitive resources, degrading subsequent choices. This explains why even brilliant individuals make poor decisions when mentally exhausted. Counterintuitively, creating decision frameworks and routines doesn't restrict freedom but preserves it for truly consequential matters. 5 practices distinguish exceptional decision makers. First, they clarify their values, creating filters that automatically eliminate options misaligned with core principles. Second, they gather sufficient but not excessive information, avoiding analysis paralysis. Third, they consult trusted advisors while maintaining decisional responsibility. Fourth, they establish decision deadlines, preventing indefinite deliberation. Fifth, they commit fully once decided, channeling energy into implementation rather than second-guessing. Perhaps most importantly, they recognize that indecision itself constitutes a decision, often the worst possible one. As Theodore Roosevelt noted, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing, the next best thing is the wrong thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing. Reflect honestly. How often do you postpone decisions hoping for perfect clarity that never arrived? How many opportunities have vanished while you hesitated? How much mental energy do you waste revisiting undecided matters? Decision-making muscle strengthens through deliberate exercise. Begin with smaller decisions made promptly and definitively. Graduate to consequential choices using structured approaches like pro-con analysis or decision matrices. With practice, you'll develop the decisive instinct that characterizes exceptional leaders. The most empowering realization is that while you cannot control outcomes, you maintain absolute sovereignty over your decisions. Will you exercise this profound power deliberately or surrender it through passivity and procrastination? Your answer to this question may be the most important decision you ever make. The strength of self-discipline, the distance between aspiration and achievement, is bridged by a single quality, self-discipline. While talent creates possibility and strategy provides direction, only disciplined execution transforms potential into reality. This force, the ability to consistently choose long-term fulfillment over immediate gratification, separates those who merely dream from those who deliberately create their destinies. Self-discipline operates as a keystone habit, strengthening every aspect of performance. Neuroscience confirms this through studies of willpower as a trainable resource. Each disciplined choice literally strengthens neural pathways associated with focus and impulse control. This creates a virtuous cycle where discipline begets greater discipline, compounding your capacity for achievement across all domains. Cecil Rhodes, born to a modest clergy family as one of 11 children, Rhodes arrived in South Africa at age 17 with fragile health and limited resources. While others sought quick fortunes in diamond fields, Rhodes methodically studied the industry, recognizing that consolidation would create unprecedented value. Despite setbacks that would have derailed less disciplined individuals, including nearly fatal heart conditions, Rhodes systematically acquired claims and established De Beers, eventually controlling 90% of global diamond production. His disciplined persistence extended beyond business, pursuing education at Oxford despite his commercial responsibilities, and establishing the Rhodes Scholarship that continues developing leaders over a century later. This pattern of disciplined persistence characterizes achievement across domains. Olympic athletes maintain training schedules regardless of motivation fluctuations. Writers produce pages daily whether inspiration strikes or not. Entrepreneurs persist through innumerable rejections before breakthrough. Their common denominator isn't extraordinary willpower, but ordinary willpower applied with extraordinary consistency. Self-discipline manifests through 3 essential practices. First, clarify compelling purposes that make discipline meaningful rather than mechanical. Connecting daily actions to deeper values creates intrinsic motivation that sustains effort when willpower falters. Second, design environments that make disciplined choices easier. Removing temptations proves more effective than repeatedly resisting them. Third, develop recovery rituals that replenish depleted willpower. Even elite performers require strategic renewal through adequate sleep, nutrition, exercise, and periodic disconnection. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that discipline isn't about perfection, but persistence. The disciplined person isn't immune to failure, but recovers quickly, maintaining forward momentum despite inevitable setbacks. Reflect honestly. How often do you surrender worthy goals at the first sign of difficulty? How frequently do momentary comforts derail your most important commitments? What achievements remain unrealized because discipline faltered when determination should have deepened? Developing self-discipline begins with small, consistent victories. Meeting the alarm clock's first ring, completing promised tasks without reminders, maintaining commitments to yourself with the same fidelity you would show to others. These seemingly minor triumphs cultivate the disciplined mind required for major achievement. The fundamental question isn't whether you're capable of discipline, you are, but whether you're willing to embrace short-term discomfort for long-term mastery. Will you continue surrendering to impulse? Or will you develop the disciplined character that makes achievement inevitable rather than occasional? Building unshakable confidence at the core of every extraordinary achievement lies an invisible force, confidence that transcends circumstance. While talent and strategy matter, nothing amplifies potential more powerfully than unwavering belief in your capabilities. This isn't abstract psychology, but practical reality. Confidence physiologically alters performance by regulating stress hormones, optimizing cognitive function, and enhancing physical coordination. True confidence arises not from external validation, but from internal cultivation. A deliberate practice of personal trust building. Each time you honor commitments to yourself, confront challenges directly, or recover from setbacks, you deposit evidence into your confidence reservoir. These accumulated experiences forge unshakable self-trust that withstands inevitable challenges. Richard Arkwright, born the youngest of 13 children to impoverished parents, Arkwright received minimal education and began life as a barber's apprentice. Despite lacking formal training, financial resources, or social connections, he recognized opportunities in textile manufacturing that others overlooked. When his early spinning frame prototypes faced skepticism and active resistance from threatened competitors, Arkwright persisted. His conviction proved warranted. His water frame revolutionized textile production, establishing the factory system that defined the Industrial Revolution and transforming Arkwright from penniless barber to knighted industrialist. This pattern repeats throughout history. Marie Curie pursued radioactivity research despite academic exclusion based on gender. Henry Ford continued refining the assembly line despite multiple business failures. Rosa Parks maintained dignity through civil disobedience despite systemic intimidation. Their common denominator wasn't absence of doubt, but refusal to be defined by it. Building unshakable confidence requires deliberate practice across 4 dimensions. First, develop competence through deliberate skill building. Confidence without capability becomes dangerous delusion. Second, maintain perspective through realistic optimism, acknowledging challenges while focusing on solutions rather than problems. Third, practice courageous action despite discomfort. Confidence follows behavior rather than preceding it. Fourth, cultivate resilient self-talk, replacing internal criticism with supportive yet honest self-coaching. Reflect candidly. How often do you diminish your capabilities through self-limiting narrative? How frequently do you abandon worthy pursuits at the first sign of difficulty? What might become possible if you approach challenges with unshakable belief in your capacity to either succeed or learn something valuable? Developing confidence begins with identifying your inner saboteur, the voice that underestimates your abilities and magnifies potential failures. When this voice surfaces, challenge it with evidence of past successes, however modest. Remember that confidence accumulates gradually through consistent small victories rather than occasional dramatic triumph. The fundamental question isn't whether you occasionally feel doubt, everyone does, but whether you allow temporary uncertainty to dictate permanent limitations. Will you continue surrendering to apprehension, or will you cultivate the courageous confidence that transforms aspirations into achievements? The world indeed bends before those who approach it with unshakable confidence, not because reality changes, but because confident individuals persistently seek solutions where others see only obstacles. Embracing change as a pathway to growth, change arrives uninvited, yet inevitable, transforming landscapes, disrupting equilibriums, and challenging comfortable certainties. Many instinctively resist these shifts, clinging to familiar patterns despite their limitations. Yet history reveals an unmistakable pattern. Those who thrive aren't necessarily the strongest or most intelligent, but those most responsive to change. Adaptability, the capacity to adjust beliefs, behaviors, and strategies in response to shifting realities, represents humanity's most essential evolutionary advantage. Charles Goodyear's facing financial ruin after his hardware store failed during an economic depression. Goodyear became obsessed with solving rubber's fundamental flaw, its tendency to melt in summer heat and crack in winter cold. Despite no formal chemistry training, mounting debts, and frequent imprisonment for those debts, Goodyear persisted through hundreds of failed experiments. His family often went hungry as he redirected scarce resources toward his obsession. After 5 years of relentless experimentation, a fortuitous accident, spilling rubber mixed with sulfur onto a hot stove, revealed the vulcanization process that revolutionized manufacturing. Though Goodyear died $200,000, 0 cents in debt, his willingness to embrace constant change and failure ultimately transformed transportation, industrial processes, and countless products we rely upon today. Neuroscience explains why change provokes such resistance. Your brain, designed primarily for survival, inherently conserves energy by favoring established neural pathways. Novel situations trigger the amygdala's threat response, releasing stress hormones that narrow thinking precisely when adaptability demands expanded perspective. Yet paradoxically, this same neuroplasticity represents your greatest strength. Each time you successfully navigate change, you literally rewire neural connections, making future adaptation progressively easier. Growth happens not despite discomfort, but because of it. Just as physical muscles develop through the stress of resistance training, cognitive and emotional resilience strengthen through navigating unfamiliar territory. This explains why periods of greatest personal development typically coincide with significant life transitions, whether chosen or thrust upon you. 3 practices distinguish those who leverage change for growth. First, cultivate mental flexibility through perspective taking, regularly challenging assumptions and viewing situations through multiple frames. Second, develop emotional agility, acknowledging difficult feelings while preventing them from dictating behavior. Third, practice deliberate discomfort, intentionally seeking growth-oriented challenges rather than waiting for change to arrive uninvited. Reflect honestly. How often do you resist necessary changes out of fear? How frequently do you interpret challenges as threats rather than invitations to evolve? What potential remains dormant because you prioritize comfort over transformation? The fundamental question isn't whether change will come, it always does, but whether you'll harness its transformative potential. Will you continue resisting the inevitable, or will you embrace change as the very catalyst your growth requires? The power of accountability. The difference between those who merely dream and those who achieve lies not in their talents or opportunities, but in their commitment to accountability. This invisible force, the willingness to answer for your actions and outcomes, transforms fleeting intentions into tangible results. Without accountability, goals remain perpetually in progress. With it, they become inevitable achievements. Accountability operates through 2 powerful mechanisms. First, it creates a psychological commitment that makes abandonment more difficult than perseverance. Second, it establishes feedback loops that illuminate blind spots and accelerate course corrections. Together, these mechanisms create the conditions where sustained progress becomes not just possible, but probable. John D. Rockefeller's methodical rise to unprecedented wealth. Beginning as a bookkeeper at age 16, Rockefeller demonstrated extraordinary accountability before accumulating extraordinary resources. While others in the chaotic early oil industry operated haphazardly, Rockefeller implemented rigorous accounting systems that tracked every cent spent and earned. His famous ledger books, maintained throughout his life, recorded not just business transactions, but personal expenditures with meticulous precision. This commitment to financial accountability revealed inefficiencies invisible to competitors, allowing Standard Oil to refine petroleum for 2.5 cents per gallon when competitors required 3 cents, a seemingly small difference that, at scale, created overwhelming competitive advantage. Rockefeller's accountability extended beyond finances to personal discipline. Rising at precisely 6:20 a.m. daily and maintaining meticulous habits, he approached self-accountability with religious devotion. When asked about his success formula, Rockefeller emphasized, "I believe it is a religious duty to get all the money you can, fairly and honestly, to keep all you can." This comprehensive accountability framework transformed him from modest beginnings into history's first billionaire. 3 practices distinguish high accountability individuals. First, they create concrete measurement systems. Vague aspirations become specific targets with clear metrics and timelines. Second, they establish supportive structures, whether accountability partners, coaches, or public commitments that make retreat uncomfortable. Third, they implement regular review processes, systematically evaluating progress and recalibrating approaches based on results rather than intentions. Perhaps most importantly, they recognize accountability as internally motivated rather than externally imposed. While others view accountability as restrictive oversight, high achievers embrace it as the freedom to determine their own outcomes rather than surrendering to circumstance or impulse. Reflect candidly. How many of your intentions remain unrealized because they lack accountability frameworks? How often do you commit privately to improvements that silently fade without consequences? What might become possible if you surrounded each important goal with structures ensuring their completion? Developing accountability begins with simple practices. Writing commitments down, sharing them with someone whose opinion you value, establishing specific review dates, and creating meaningful consequences for both success and failure. These basic structures create the conditions where honoring commitments becomes easier than abandoning them. The fundamental question isn't whether accountability works. Evidence confirms it unequivocally does. But whether you're willing to embrace the temporary discomfort of answering for your actions to access the permanent freedom of achieving your aspirations. Will you continue setting goals without accountability mechanisms, virtually guaranteeing their abandonment? Or will you surround each worthy objective with structures ensuring their completion? Remember, accountability isn't the enemy of freedom, but its prerequisite, creating the structured path that leads to your most liberated self. Cultivating emotional intelligence. The most sophisticated intelligence lies not in logical reasoning or technical expertise, but in understanding the nuanced landscape of human emotion. While IQ may determine what you're capable of learning, emotional intelligence, your capacity to recognize, understand, manage, and effectively express emotions, determines how successfully you navigate relationships, workplace dynamics, and life's inevitable challenges. Emotional intelligence operates through 4 interconnected dimensions. Self-awareness forms the foundation, the ability to accurately identify your emotional states and understand how they influence your thoughts and behavior. Self-regulation builds upon this awareness, managing emotions productively rather than being controlled by them. Social awareness extends your emotional perception outward, recognizing others' emotions through empathetic understanding. Relationship management integrates these capabilities, using emotional insights to build meaningful connections and resolve conflicts constructively. Developing emotional intelligence begins with daily practices. pausing before responding to emotional triggers, naming your feelings with precise language, seeking feedback about your blind spots, and practicing perspective-taking during disagreement. The mindfulness meditation practiced by many successful leaders specifically strengthens the neural connections between your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala, enhancing emotional regulation capacity. Neuroscience confirms emotional intelligence tangible impact. Brain imaging studies demonstrate that emotionally intelligent individuals process emotional information through brain pathways that integrate rational and emotional centers, allowing for thoughtful responses rather than impulsive reactions. This integration explains why emotional intelligence predicts workplace performance more accurately than IQ or technical expertise across multiple studies. Reflect honestly. How often do emotions hijack your best intentions? How frequently do you misinterpret others' motives? What opportunities remain unrealized because emotional reactions override reasoned responses? The critical question isn't whether emotional intelligence matters. Research conclusively demonstrates it does, but whether you're willing to develop this capacity with the same dedication you might apply to technical skills. Will you continue allowing unexamined emotions to dictate outcomes, or will you cultivate the emotional intelligence that transforms challenging interactions into opportunities for connection and growth? Remember, those who master emotions master not just themselves, but the invisible forces that shape human interaction across every domain of life. Developing mental toughness, the ultimate determinant of achievement, isn't talent, opportunity, or even strategy. It's mental. This fundamental quality, the capacity to persist through adversity, maintain focus despite distractions, and recover from setbacks, separates extraordinary performers from those who merely show potential. While physical strength visibly transforms bodies, mental toughness invisibly transforms outcomes across every domain of human endeavor. Mental toughness operates through four interconnected components. Control allows you to influence rather than be influenced by circumstances. Commitment maintains focus on goals despite obstacles. Challenge reframes adversity as opportunity rather than threat. Confidence provides the self-belief necessary to confront difficulties rather than avoid them. Together, these elements create psychological resilience that withstands pressures that would derail less prepared minds. Consider Ernest Shackleton's extraordinary leadership during the Imperial Transantarctic Expedition. After their ship Endurance became trapped in pack ice and eventually crushed, Shackleton led 27 men through a nightmare scenario where survival seemed impossible. For 497 days, they endured temperatures reaching 85 DFF, severe malnutrition, frostbite, and crushing uncertainty. When hope diminished, Shackleton demonstrated unwavering optimism, famously telling his men, "Difficulties are just things to overcome." When provisions dwindled, he personally sacrificed his portions. When rescue required crossing 800 miles of treacherous Antarctic waters in a modified lifeboat, Shackleton led the journey himself. His mental toughness manifested not just in personal endurance, but in maintaining morale that kept every expedition member alive against astronomical odds. Developing mental toughness begins with deliberate discomfort, strategically exposing yourself to challenges that expand your psychological limits. Olympic swimmers train in intentionally adverse conditions. Special forces candidates endure sleep deprivation to build mental resilience. While these extreme examples aren't necessary for daily life, their underlying principle remains. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Each time you voluntarily embrace difficulty, whether physical challenges, intellectual struggles, or emotional discomfort, you expand your capacity to handle future adversity. Neuroscience confirms mental toughness can be systematically developed. Research shows that deliberate stress exposure combined with recovery creates psychological adaptations similar to how muscles strengthen through resistance and repair. This explains why individuals who regularly confront challenges develop greater emotional regulation, optimize stress responses, and enhanced performance under pressure. Three practices distinguish mentally tough individuals. First, they develop constructive self-talk, replacing catastrophic interpretations with realistic assessments and solution-focused thinking. Second, they practice intentional breathing and physiological control during stress, regulating autonomic responses rather than being hijacked by them. Third, they visualize success through adversity, mentally rehearsing effective responses to potential obstacles before encountering them. Reflect honestly. How often do you abandon worthy pursuits at the first significant resistance? How frequently do you seek comfort when growth requires discomfort? What might become possible if you develop the mental toughness to persist when others would quit? The fundamental question isn't whether mental toughness works. History conclusively demonstrates it does. But whether you're willing to systematically develop this capacity through deliberate exposure to progressive challenges, will you continue avoiding necessary discomfort, or will you cultivate the mental toughness that transforms inevitable obstacles from stopping points into stepping stones? Remember, mental toughness isn't about never feeling fear, pain, or doubt. It's about advancing despite them. The art of delayed gratification. The fundamental divide between extraordinary achievement and perpetual mediocrity often comes down to a deceptively simple choice: the willingness to sacrifice immediate pleasure for superior future rewards. While our neurological wiring naturally gravitates toward instant gratification, a survival mechanism from evolutionary history, mastering delayed gratification represents perhaps the most powerful predictor of long-term success across all domains of human endeavor. Benjamin Franklin's contemporaries pursued immediate pleasures. Franklin systematically developed himself through rigorous daily routines. Rising at 5 a.m., he dedicated early hours to learning and self-improvement before beginning work. Rather than spending his earnings on luxuries, he reinvested in printing equipment that multiplied his capabilities. While others sought immediate social approval, Franklin practiced 13 virtues methodically, focusing on one each week. His famous statement, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest," encapsulated his philosophy of sacrificing present comfort for future capacity. Franklin's delayed gratification extended beyond personal development to civic contribution. He established America's first lending library when immediate financial return would have come from keeping books privately. He refused to patent his inventions when immediate profit was available. He spent years abroad securing crucial French support for American independence rather than enjoying comfortable retirement. This consistent pattern of sacrificing immediate rewards created a legacy spanning science, politics, publishing, and diplomacy, achievements impossible without disciplined patience. The practice of delayed gratification requires developing three. First, future visualization, creating vivid mental representations of long-term benefits that make them emotionally compelling against immediate temptations. Second, impulse interruption, inserting space between stimulus and response through techniques like the 10-second rule. Third, environment design, structuring your surroundings to make disciplined choices easier by removing immediate temptations. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that delayed gratification becomes self-reinforcing. Each time you successfully prioritize future rewards over immediate pleasures, you strengthen both the neural pathways supporting this capacity and your belief in your ability to exercise it, creating positive momentum that transforms isolated choices into lifelong patterns. Reflect honestly. How often do investment opportunities remain unexplored because they require upfront sacrifice? How frequently do immediate comforts derail long-term health, financial, or professional goals? What potential remains unrealized because gratification delayed seems like gratification denied? The fundamental question isn't whether delayed gratification works. Research conclusively demonstrates it does, but whether you're willing to embrace temporary discomfort for superior long-term outcomes. Will you continue prioritizing what feels good momentarily, or will you cultivate the patience that transforms ordinary potential into extraordinary achievement? Building a legacy that lasts. Legacy transcends achievement, extending beyond tangible accomplishments to the enduring impact you create in lives, organizations, and communities. While accolades fade and possessions diminish, legacy persists through transformed lives and perpetuated values. This profound footprint represents the ultimate measure of a life well lived. Not what you accumulate, but what you contribute that continues influencing generations beyond your time. John Cadbury's beginning. As a tea dealer in 1824 Birmingham, Cadbury could have pursued profit alone in an era when industrial exploitation was standard practice. Instead, he infused his Quaker values into every business decision, believing commercial success and social responsibility were inseparable companions rather than competing interests. While contemporaries exploited workers, Cadbury pioneered revolutionary working conditions, establishing health care benefits, education programs, and eventually building Burnville Village with quality housing, parks, recreational facilities, and schools for employees and their families. This commitment to human dignity wasn't merely philanthropic window dressing, but foundational to Cadbury's business philosophy. He famously stated that business had both a soul and a body, and the soul is the most important of the two. Despite facing competitive disadvantages from these investments, Cadbury maintained that ethical operation would create sustainable advantage. History validated his conviction. Cadbury's principled approach attracted exceptional talent, fostered innovation, built consumer trust, and established a corporate culture that propelled the company's success long after his death. Building lasting legacy requires cultivating four interconnected dimensions. First, values legacy, identifying, articulating, and consistently demonstrating core principles that guide decisions. Second, relationship legacy, investing in meaningful connections that transform lives through mentorship, guidance, and authentic presence. Third, institutional legacy, creating or strengthening organizations that perpetuate positive impact beyond your direct involvement. Fourth, knowledge legacy, developing and sharing wisdom that empowers others to build upon your contributions. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that legacy building happens daily through seemingly minor choices rather than occasional grand gestures. Each interaction either reinforces or undermines the values you hope to perpetuate. Each decision either strengthens or weakens the institutions you hope will continue your work. Each relationship either transmits or dilutes the wisdom you've accumulated. Reflect honestly. What values do your daily actions, which organizations or communities are stronger because of your involvement? Who is developing more fully because of your influence? What wisdom are you systematically transferring that will outlast your direct contribution? The profound question isn't what you'll accumulate or achieve, but what will remain when you're gone. Will your impact diminish rapidly after your departure, or will it continue rippling outward through lives, organizations, and communities you've meaningfully shaped? Legacy building begins with clarifying purpose beyond personal success, identifying contributions uniquely aligned with your values, strengths, and opportunities. It continues through deliberate investment in relationships and institutions that can perpetuate these contributions. It culminates in creating self-sustaining impact that continues growing without your direct involvement. Will you focus exclusively on achievements measured within your lifetime, or will you cultivate the patience, vision, and generosity required to build something truly enduring? Mastering the art of time management. Time stands as life's ultimate equalizer, offering precisely 24 hours daily to every human regardless of wealth, status, or ambition. Yet some individuals extract extraordinary value from this fixed allocation, while others squander it on activities yielding minimal return. The difference lies not in having more time, but in deploying it with strategic precision, transforming this finite resource into a competitive advantage through deliberate management. Time management operates as both science and art. The science involves systematic approaches to organization, planning, prioritization, and elimination of non-essential activities. The art involves recognizing which moments deserve expansion and which warrant compression, understanding that value derives not merely from efficiency, but from effectiveness in directing hours toward meaningful contribution. Thomas Jefferson's extraordinary productivity across domains that typically require singular focus. While serving as America's third president, ambassador to France, and Secretary of State, Jefferson simultaneously pursued architecture, invented numerous devices, mastered multiple languages, maintained extensive correspondence, and authored works that shaped democracy's foundations. This wasn't merely talent, but deliberate time management. Jefferson's system included rising at dawn, carefully dividing his day into increments, and maintaining meticulous records of his time allocation. He famously stated, "The sun has not caught me in bed in 50 years." Rather than approaching time casually, Jefferson treated it with the same precision he applied to scientific experiments, testing approaches, measuring results, and refining methods based on outcomes. Effective time management requires developing 4 interconnected practices. First, value clarification, identifying what genuinely matters versus what merely appears urgent. Second, intentional allocation, designing your calendar to reflect your priorities rather than others' expectations. Third, focused execution, developing the discipline to maintain deep concentration despite distractions. Fourth, strategic renewal, recognizing that effective time management paradoxically requires building recovery periods that replenish mental resources. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that time management serves meaningful purpose rather than mere efficiency. The objective isn't becoming a productivity machine, but creating space for what matters most: deep relationships, meaningful work, personal growth, and contributions that outlast your lifetime. Reflect honestly. How often does your calendar reflect others' priorities rather than your own? How frequently do low-value activities consume hours while high-impact opportunities remain unexplored? What potential contributions remain unrealized because time flows through your life unmanaged? The fundamental question isn't whether time passes, it inevitably does, but whether it passes purposefully. Will you continue allowing external demands and internal distractions to fragment your attention, or will you develop the disciplines that transform time from enemy to ally? Remember, mastering time management doesn't constrain freedom, but creates it, establishing the structured foundation upon which meaningful achievement becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The importance of strategic thinking. Strategic thinking transcends mere planning. It represents the capacity to envision possibilities beyond immediate circumstances while simultaneously orchestrating resources and actions toward deliberate outcomes. While tactical thinkers focus on executing immediate tasks effectively, strategic thinkers perceive interconnections, anticipate consequences, and position themselves advantageously for opportunities not yet visible to others. This essential distinction explains why equally talented individuals achieve dramatically different results. Tactical thinking reacts to circumstances, strategic thinking creates them. Tactical thinking addresses present problems, strategic thinking prevents them. Tactical thinking maximizes current resources, strategic thinking develops future capabilities that transform competitive landscapes. Andrew W. Mellon's extraordinary impact on American industry. Beginning as a judge's son in Pittsburgh, Mellon transformed banking practices by financing businesses others overlooked, particularly those positioned at inflection points of emerging industries. While conventional bankers followed established patterns, Mellon methodically studied industrial evolution, identifying aluminum, steel, oil, and shipbuilding as sectors poised for exponential growth. His decision to finance Alcoa represented not merely another investment, but a strategic bet on aluminum's potential to revolutionize multiple industries. Mellon's strategic brilliance extended beyond individual investments to synergistic portfolios, creating complementary holdings that strengthened each component's position. When Treasury Secretary under 3 presidents, Mellon again demonstrated strategic foresight, implementing tax policies and debt reduction strategies that facilitated America's unprecedented economic expansion during the 1920s. Even his art acquisitions reflected strategic thinking, systematically collecting masterpieces that eventually became the National Gallery's foundation. Developing strategic thinking requires cultivating 4 interconnected capacities. First, systems perspective, recognizing how components interact rather than viewing elements in isolation. Second, pattern recognition, identifying recurring dynamics that reveal underlying trends and principles. Third, scenario planning, mentally simulating various futures to prepare for multiple contingencies. Fourth, disciplined patience, maintaining long-term orientation despite pressure for immediate results. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that strategic thinking simultaneously embraces paradoxes that tactical thinking attempts to resolve prematurely. Strategic thinkers balance stability with adaptability, short-term performance with long-term capability, analysis with intuition, and global perspective with local implementation. Understanding that either/or thinking creates vulnerability, while both/and thinking creates resilience. Reflect honestly. How frequently do urgent matters displace important ones in your attention? How often do immediate opportunities divert you from more significant long-term advantages? What possibilities remain unexplored because you're focused on executing today's plan rather than designing tomorrow's? The fundamental question isn't whether strategic thinking matters. History conclusively demonstrates it does, but whether you're willing to develop this capacity by dedicating time for reflection, studying systems, examining patterns, and cultivating the patience required to position yourself advantageously for opportunities not yet visible to others. Remember, strategic thinking isn't merely about having foresight, but about creating the present conditions that make your desired future not just possible, but probable. Overcoming fear and embracing courage. Fear stands as humanity's most ancient emotional response, a survival mechanism that protected our ancestors from legitimate dangers, but now often prevents modern humans from pursuing meaningful growth. While fear once saved us from predators, today it frequently robs us of opportunities, relationships, and achievements that define a fully lived life. The neuroscience of fear reveals its deceptive nature. When confronting uncertain situations, your amygdala triggers a cascade of stress hormones, preparing you for fight or flight before your prefrontal cortex can rationally evaluate actual risk. This evolutionary wiring creates a persistent illusion, making imagined consequences feel more threatening than they truly are. Understanding this biological reality transforms how we interpret fear's presence, not as evidence of danger, but as confirmation you're expanding beyond comfortable limitations. Elizabeth Blackwell's extraordinary journey toward becoming America's first female physician. When she applied to medical schools in 1847, she faced rejection from 29 institutions before Geneva Medical College finally admitted her, and then only because male students thought her application was a practical joke. Throughout her training, she endured systematic exclusion from demonstrations, patient interactions, and professional respect. Contemporary physicians publicly declared women physically and intellectually incapable of medical practice, while societal voices warned her pursuit was not merely difficult, but morally wrong. Blackwell's response exemplifies authentic courage, acknowledging fear without surrendering to it. She later wrote of experiencing a certain awe and fear throughout her journey, yet proceeded despite trembling. After graduating first in her class in 1849, she established the New York Infirmary for Women and Children, founded the first medical school for women, and transformed medical education internationally, all while experiencing the same fears that would have paralyzed less courageous individuals. Developing courage requires three interconnected practices. First, perspective expansion. Recognizing that fear's whispers often exaggerate consequences while minimizing your capacity to handle them. Second, gradual exposure. Systematically confronting smaller fears to build courage muscles for larger challenges. Third, purpose connection. Anchoring courageous action to values and contributions that matter more than momentary comfort. Perhaps most importantly, understand that courage isn't fearlessness, but action despite fear. The truly courageous experience the same physiological responses as everyone else, racing heartbeats, butterflies, catastrophic thoughts, but refuse to allow these temporary sensations to determine their permanent limitations. Reflect honestly. How many opportunities have you abandoned, not because they were impossible, but because they felt uncomfortable? What potential contributions remain unexpressed because fear whispered they were too difficult or risky? What might become possible if you acknowledged fear without granting it decision-making authority? The fundamental question isn't whether fear will appear. It inevitably will whenever you approach meaningful growth. but whether you'll treat it as a barrier or simply information. Will you continue allowing fear to define your boundaries, or will you develop the courage that transforms fear from prison guard to simply an uncomfortable companion on your journey toward an expanded life? Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The richest possibilities in your life await on the other side of fear's illusory barriers. Building strong relationships and powerful networks. The myth of the self-made individual obscures a fundamental truth. Extraordinary achievement emerges not through isolation, but through connection. Behind every remarkable success story lies an invisible web of relationships, mentors who guided, colleagues who collaborated, and networks that amplified individual capacity into collective impact. Your ability to cultivate these connections represents perhaps your most valuable professional asset. Relationship capital operates on three distinct levels. Operational connections provide immediate resources and opportunities. Strategic relationships offer wisdom, perspective, and guidance that shape decision-making. Transformational connections challenge assumptions and expand possibilities beyond current paradigms. The most successful individuals deliberately develop all three types while understanding their unique contributions. Henry Clay Frick's extraordinary rise from modest beginnings to industrial titan. Beginning as a bookkeeper in his grandfather's distillery, Frick recognized early that advancement required more than technical skill. It demanded strategic relationship development. His careful cultivation of banking relationships provided crucial financing for his initial Coke operations when competitors struggled to secure capital. His alliance with Andrew Carnegie transformed both their trajectories. Combining Frick's operational expertise in Coke production with Carnegie's steel manufacturing created unprecedented vertical integration. Frick's networking extended beyond immediate business circles to deliberately encompass political, cultural, and financial spheres of influence. His relationships with figures like banker Andrew Mellon and political leader Mark Hanna created information channels that provided competitive advantage through early awareness of economic shifts, regulatory changes, and market opportunities. While competitors reacted to developments, Frick positioned himself ahead of them through strategic relationship cultivation. Building powerful networks requires developing four interconnected practices. First, authentic curiosity, demonstrating genuine interest in others' experiences, perspectives, and expertise rather than instrumental connection. Second, consistent value creation, contributing meaningfully to others' success before expecting reciprocal benefit. Third, strategic introduction, connecting individuals whose collaboration creates mutual advantage. Fourth, relationship maintenance, nurturing connections through regular, meaningful contact rather than transactional interaction only when needs arise. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that relation cultivation rather than occasional harvesting. The most powerful networks emerge from consistent investment in relationships when you don't immediately need anything, creating reserves of goodwill and connection that become available during inevitable challenges requiring collaboration. Reflect honestly. How often do you approach networking as a genuine opportunity for mutual growth rather than transactional exchange? How frequently do you invest in relationship maintenance with existing connections versus pursuing new ones? What opportunities remain unexplored because your network lacks diversity across industries, backgrounds, or perspectives? The fundamental question isn't whether relationship capital matters. Research conclusively demonstrates it does. But whether you're willing to approach it with the same strategic intention you apply to other professional assets. Will you continue viewing relationships as fortunate accidents, or will you deliberately cultivate the constellation of connections that transforms individual capacity into collective achievement? Remember, networks don't merely reflect your net worth. They determine what becomes possible through combined capability, shared information, and mutual support that transcends individual limitation. The principle of lifelong learning. The dividing line between continual relevance and inevitable obsolescence lies in one's commitment to perpetual learning. While formal education concludes, genuine learning never does. It transforms from institutional requirement to personal revolution, from external expectation to internal imperative. Those who embrace this principle don't merely adapt to changing landscapes, they anticipate and shape them. Learning operates through neurological transformation, literally rewiring neural pathways through deliberate practice and exposure to new information. Each time you acquire knowledge or develop skills, you're not simply accumulating information, but fundamentally restructuring your cognitive architecture. This neuroplasticity explains why continuous learning creates compound returns. Each new insight connects with existing knowledge, creating exponential rather than linear growth in understanding. Cultivating lifelong learning requires developing 4 interconnected practices. First, structured curiosity. Systematically exploring domains beyond current expertise rather than merely deepening existing knowledge. Second, deliberate application. Immediately implementing new insights rather than treating learning as theoretical exercise. Third, reflective documentation, capturing observations and conclusions to build personal knowledge repositories. Fourth, knowledge sharing, teaching others to solidify understanding through articulation. Perhaps most importantly, recognize that learning transcends formal contexts, emerging through conversations, experiences, failures, and reflection. The most powerful insights often appear not in classrooms, but in moments of genuine curiosity followed by systematic investigation. Reflect honestly. How often do you approach each day as an opportunity for deliberate growth rather than mere productivity? How frequently do you venture beyond comfortable expertise into domains that challenge existing assumptions? What potential remains undiscovered because learning has become incidental rather than intentional? The fundamental question isn't whether learning matters. History conclusively demonstrates it does. But whether you'll approach it with the strategic intention it deserves. Will you continue treating knowledge acquisition as occasional necessity, or will you embrace the transformative power of perpetual learning that turns ordinary potential into extraordinary impact? Remember, in a world of accelerating change, the only sustainable advantage lies not in what you currently know, but in how rapidly you can learn what you don't yet understand. Raise your standards and watch your life transform. Demand excellence from yourself, refuse mediocrity, and set the bar higher every day. When you expect more, you achieve more. Stop settling for less than you deserve. Build a life that reflects your true potential. Start today, because your standards define your destiny.